Greetings, Culture Warriors. It is Jeff Vieira, the author of Culture is Everything, and your host for this latest dispatch from the front. We enter another interesting world today when we talk about the military. So let's take a look at what's going on over there and see what it has to tell us about values in conflict. This is a story from the Washington Post by Shane Harris, Missy Ryan, Josh Dawsey, Greg Miller. Hopefully between the four of them we can get some grammatical correctness here. Let's see. Roland Trump's impeachment casts shadow over Army officer's promotion. An Army officer's promotion is in jeopardy over what some officials fear could be White House retaliation for his role in last year's impeachment inquiry, raising the possibility that President Trump might again intervene in military affairs, according to officials familiar with the matter. I wonder who those officials might be. Lieutenant Colonel Alexander Vindman, who received a Purple Heart for his actions in Iraq and later served as a White House aide on European affairs, is among hundreds of officers selected to be promoted to full colonel this year. Such promotions are typically signed off by the Army and then Pentagon leaders before moving to the White House and the Senate for a confirmation vote. The list is now with the Pentagon Personnel Office. Multiple government officials who spoke on the condition of anonymity to address personnel matters have voiced concern, however, that the White House could strike Vindman's name once it is conveyed, effectively sanctioning him for testimony he gave under subpoena to House lawmakers. A senior official said the White House has not received or approved a list of those up for promotions. A second official said that Trump dislikes Vindman more than any other witness in the impeachment proceeding and noted he was the first one fired when it ended. The president said it was a total disgrace what he did, the official said. The second official said they didn't know what Trump would do, but couldn't imagine that he would support Vindman's promotion. The uncertainty surrounding Vindman's promotion comes at a sensitive moment for Pentagon leaders, as they seek to move past a major crisis in civil-military relations caused by the participation of armed forces in response to recent civil unrest and the perception that top Defense Department officials were inappropriately involved in one of the most politically and racially charged episodes in recent U.S. history. All right, that's a lot of nonsense up front that we have to deal with. So before I resume, let me add some facts that the four Washington Post reporters seem to be unaware of. Number one is that every officer in the United States military, every officer swears an oath. That oath is to defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, to bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and to obey the orders of those lawfully appointed over them without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and to fulfill the duties of the office upon which they are about to enter. Vindman's job did not require him to take part in a coup d'etat. Period. That is what Vindman did. Vindman, a lieutenant colonel who was a White House aide in European affairs, felt that he was better charged with determining who the president of the United States should be than the American people, than the American voter. That is what Vindman did. That is why he was testifying. Now, in the United States of America, we are very, very clear that the military is controlled by the civilian government. That means that the top positions in the military are subject to confirmation, as indicated in the article. That means that the higher you go up in rank, the more your promotability is tied to civilian leadership being on board with you being promoted. Now, the truth of the matter is that for most of our history, political interference in the promotion of military personnel has been relatively muted. When I say relatively muted, I mean at the federal level. At the state level, the fact of the matter is there has always been that kind of involvement. The reason being, for example, I'm a graduate of the Air Force Academy. In order to get into the Air Force Academy, I had to have a congressional appointment. So that meant I had to meet with congressmen and senators. In my case, in my state, I met with 3, who would then evaluate my fitness as a candidate to be a cadet and decide whether they would forward me as one of their names to get into the academy. So that's the state kind of picking who gets to be an officer ultimately. As my classmates have proceeded along in their careers, they come to various promotion boards which decide if they're going to get the next level of rank. And by the time you see people start dropping away mainly when you get to major. That's the first kind of real board for whether you're going to be a field grade officer or not. And you see some percentage don't make major. I was out of the military before major. You see others fall away at lieutenant colonel, others at colonel, others by the time it comes time to be a general. But what's happened since the Clinton era, the Clinton administration, has been increasing federal interference in those promotion boards. There are a couple of cases I won't bore you with. At the time, they scandalized those of us in the military who were used to that lack of federal interference. But Bill Clinton felt the need to remake the top military brass in a manner more suitable to him. Clinton famously dodged the Vietnam draft. That didn't sit well with some of the top generals. Now, they were too professional to really let that color them, but Clinton, being Clinton, couldn't tolerate it. And so he started interfering in the promotion boards to make sure that people like Merrill McPeak, otherwise known as Tony McPeak, became Chief of Staff of the Air Force. To make sure that his old buddy from Arkansas was promoted and given command of NATO, nearly getting us in a war with Russia in the process. You might recognize his name, Wes Clark. So you started seeing in supposedly apolitical generals, you started seeing generals who are well known for their left-wing politics, for their Democrat politics. You started seeing them taking all the key positions in the Pentagon. This was due to Bill Clinton interjecting himself into the promotion process. Now, the fact of the matter is constitutionally, as Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, the President of the United States does have considerable sway over how the military operates. If you're a Civil War aficionado, you'll remember that Abraham Lincoln determined who led the Army of the Potomac. And he went through a number of generals before settling in on Ulysses Grant, who simply failed in the role. They weren't aggressive enough, and he was looking for an aggressive general, and he settled finally on Grant based on what Grant had done in the Wilderness Campaign, and put him in charge effectively of the Union Army. So there's a precedent for the president to pick the top slots. But Clinton reached down well into the ranks. And you can also see that in an institution like the military, people read the tea leaves pretty effectively. So if they see that it's outspoken Democrats who are getting promoted, you can bet that Republicans will keep their mouth shut. That's the way it works. And over time, after Clinton left office, Bush had a lighter hand. Bush the Younger had a lighter hand on promotions. He didn't really undo what Clinton had done. So you continued to see that having a allegiance to the Democrat Party was an aid in getting promoted to higher levels of rank in the military throughout that whole period. When Obama came in office and had similar concerns to Clinton, he had an even stronger hand in determining who the top officers were going to be. It was at this point, by the way, that a lot of my classmates started falling out of the military. Like rain. I had one colleague, he was my former cadet squadron commander. He was actually the last man to land a space shuttle. This was a guy who was just amazing. Top in his class, valedictorian for the Air Force Academy his year. He's 2 years ahead. Completed pilot training, first in his class. Went on to F-16s and F-15s, first in his class. Went on to be a test pilot, first in his class. Went on to be a space shuttle pilot, last man to land the space shuttle. Phenomenally accomplished pilot. And I would say, excuse me, a tremendous military leader as well. And yet, topped out at colonel. I suspect because he was not a Democrat. Or if he was a Democrat, he wasn't vocal enough in being a Democrat to make the political connections to become a general. So that's kind of the background. What you see here, the military is supposed to be independent, but over time, Democrats have worked to ensure that you don't get to be a flag officer unless you're a Democrat. It's that simple. A senior official said the White House has not received or approved a list of those up for promotion. Second official says he dislikes Vindman even more. I read that part earlier. My apologies. The uncertainty surrounding Vindman's promotion comes at a sensitive moment. Oh, I really did scroll up a little bit too much there. While the fate of an officer at Vindman's grade wouldn't usually draw the scrutiny of senior White House officials, decisions about his military career path have taken on political overtones since he emerged as a key figure in the impeachment drama. Yeah, here's a lesson. Don't emerge as a key figure in a political drama. When Oliver North went to testify as a Marine lieutenant colonel to Congress over Iran-Contra, it did not go well for his military career. In his role as the National Security Council's Ukraine expert, now you see the tie here. Joe Biden and his family have been up to their eyeballs in money from Ukraine, from Burisma, that Ukrainian energy company, right? So this guy was the National Security Council's Ukraine expert. Vindman listened to a call in July between Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. In the call, Trump asked the Ukrainian government to open an investigation into former Vice President Joe Biden, now the presumptive Democrat nominee for vice president, but at the time, the outgoing vice president. So there was an important predicate for wanting to know what Biden was up to with Ukraine. Vindman told House investigators that he was alarmed by the call and that Trump appeared to condition military aid to Ukraine on the investigation. That's Vindman's take on it. Was Vindman's job to run to his Democrat buddies with that take? No. Vindman's testimony, which was corroborated by other officials as well as a partial transcript of the call released by the White House, became crucial first-hand evidence in Trump's trial in the Senate, where he was acquitted. Yeah, guess what? The information wasn't deemed credible. When they released the whole transcript of it, it didn't quite have the spin that the Washington Post was trying to put on it here. In February, Trump removed Vindman from his post at the NSC in what many officials saw as retribution for his testimony. Or you could view it as he was a uniformed military officer who was trying to take part in a coup d'etat against his commander-in-chief. I dare say Abraham Lincoln fired such people. Look up McClellan. Vindman, a decorated combat veteran, was escorted out of the White House. At the time, Trump ordered the ousting of Vindman's twin brother, Yevgeny. Yevgeny, that's an interesting... Why is he named Yevgeny? Why, it almost seems as though he might have familial ties to Ukraine or Russia. A chief ethics lawyer at the NSC who did not testify in the impeachment probe. Well, he was smarter than his brother. The president has also attacked Vindman personally and questioned his credibility. How dare he? How dare he? My goodness, you should see what some presidents have had to say about some of their military people. Can you imagine? Well, you don't have to imagine it. It's probably a matter of record on there. What do you think LBJ thought about Westmoreland? Think they were buddies, pals? Vindman was very insubordinate, reported contents of my perfect calls incorrectly, and was given a horrendous report by his superior, Trump tweeted after the officer's removal. In other words, out. All right, and the fact of the matter is if that report by his superior is part of his record, the guy got no chance of being promoted. Let me tell you how these boards work, is when you see what is put in the officer's evaluation report, they fight over the most glowing verbs in these reports. And if it's anything less than that, if you have anything less than a perfect rating, you do not get promoted, period. So if he was given a horrendous report by his superior officer, he ain't getting promoted, period. It won't even get to the list to Congress. One U.S. official said the finalization of the Army promotion roster had been held up longer than originally anticipated by a number of factors, including the coronavirus crisis, and concerns that the White House might remove Vindman's name from the list. Well, let me tell you something. If, after receiving a negative report like that, and if, after being publicly outed as part of a coup d'etat, that if the U.S. Army puts him forth for promotion, they are declaring war on their own commander-in-chief. Now, I told you that you won't find a flag officer in the Army who isn't a Democrat at this point. Now, that may be the reason why they would ignore the man's fitness report and put him forward on the list for promotion anyway. But bear in mind that if they do that, the Army Chief of Staff really ought to be the next to go. And several officers up for promotion have said they anticipated that the final list would have been approved by now and that it was being held up over Vindman and the potential reaction from the president his ascension might trigger. But a senior defense official said there had been zero delay and said speculation about the causes of the non-existent delay are fabricated and incorrect. I actually believe that. You know, what you're hearing is basically disgruntled Democrats who are just feeding kind of garbage to the Washington Post. I doubt seriously that the Army is going to go to war with their own commander-in-chief. Number one, I don't think those guys have the intestinal fortitude for doing it. They're cutting their own throat from a budget perspective, among other things. But I also don't think it will sit right with most officers for the Army to be nakedly political in that fashion. Maybe things have just gotten so bad that there won't be an uprising for that, but in my day there would have been. In a statement, Pentagon spokeswoman Lisa Lawrence said the department follows applicable laws and regulations with regard to developing and reviewing officer promotion lists and submitting them to the White House and Senate. This list and any names on it have been and will be treated as customary. She declined to comment on Vindman specifically, nor should she. Vindman's attorney, David Pressman, said if the list was delayed, it would have professional consequences for other lieutenant colonels who the Army has approved for a step up in rank. That's true. For his lifetime of service and his commitment to the rule of law, Lieutenant Colonel Vindman has been targeted by the President of the United States and his proxies in an effort to humiliate and intimidate. No, he's a lower-ranking officer who decided that he was going to join with Comey and with Brennan, and he was going to be the 7 days in May key player for this coup d'etat. And he probably should be court-martialed for that. Unsatisfied by the results of their campaign of intimidation, the White House has also sought to retaliate. This campaign of intimidation and retaliation has led a decorated soldier to be marched out of the White House, his family threatened, and now a coordinated effort to forever limit his ability to continue to serve our country. After being abruptly being dismissed from his White House position in February, Vindman was assigned to Fort Belvoir outside Washington, where he's working on defense policy. If Vindman's promotion was blocked over his involvement in the impeachment, many in the military will likely see it as another troubling sign at a moment of soul-searching for officers across the services following the events of recent weeks. Here is where the Washington Post does not know what the hell they are talking about. I served in part during the Clinton administration. And I can tell you that when the Monica Lewinsky business broke, Bill Clinton, in his infinite wisdom, decided at the same time that we needed a major push against sexual harassment in the military. And so we were handed a script, every officer, and we were required to have all of our people hear us read the script on sexual harassment. And what do you think happened when we asked for questions? So I'm staring down a bunch of folks from my flight, all different ranks, from airman on up through chief. I've read the script that I was instructed to read. And what do you think they asked when those hands went up? In every single session, and I think I did 3, the answer was the same. Does this apply to the commander-in-chief? Oh, you can imagine the tap dancing that I and my brother officers had to do. Well, it's not really relevant. Well, he did it. And now he's telling us what? How is it that the commander-in-chief is fit to serve, having done this? Why isn't he gone? Any airman who did it would be gone. Why is he gone? Why isn't he gone? It was a goat rope. But I can tell you that all of these NCOs, all of these airmen, regardless of what their own personal political affiliation may have been, regardless of their background, there was simply a chorus of indignation that this man had the audacity to try to impose upon them something that he had clearly not followed. That is how the military tends to view things. Trump's desire to use active duty military forces against protesters following the death in police custody of George Floyd late last month prompted clashes with Defense Secretary Mark T. Esper, who also should be fired. He's an Obama appointee. He's still on the Obama team, who later publicly spoke out against that move. But both Esper and General Mark A. Milley, the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, were subject to an outpouring of criticism from retired military officials over their role in those events and for appearing alongside Trump as he toured an area near the White House from which protesters had been forcibly cleared by security forces. Milley later apologized for appearing with the president in Lafayette Square, and for that he should be fired. Those events compounded the strains caused by Trump's repeated flouting of norms that have traditionally guided presidential interactions with the military. Oh, what garbage. Trump actually did go to military school, unlike many a predecessor. It's very simple. there is a precedent in the United States going all the way back to the Whiskey Rebellion during George Washington's time in office for the military restoring order to areas which are subject to rioters. This has always been the case. You can go back to the 60s, and you can see where Democrat presidents broke up rioting against the Vietnam War using the National Guard, using federal troops in some cases. So this is nothing new. The people at the Washington Post simply pretend it's something new and unprecedented. Moreover, the military, having had quite a large amount of urban warfare experience and peacekeeping experience in the Middle East over the last 20 years, are very well trained to do this. So what the controversy is I don't know. Maybe you should talk to the people who are throwing the bricks and burning the buildings and see where the controversy is. While proposed promotions can be stalled even in their final stages for a number of reasons, including investigation or disciplinary actions, it would be unusual for an officer's promotion to be derailed for this kind of reason. Yeah, because most officers are not stupid enough to take part in a coup d'etat. Esper and other senior Pentagon officials have stated repeatedly that there would be no retribution against Vindman or any other service member. Yes, for which they should be fired. He should be court-martialed. His fate has drawn attention on Capitol Hill, where lawmakers, including Senate Minority Leader Charles E. Schumer, Democrat from New York, have sought assurances to that effect. I wonder why Chuck is out defending this guy. Can you think of any reason why Chuck Schumer might be so interested in defending this guy? Does Chuck Schumer strike you as someone who's pro-military? Never has been. Several days before the ouster of Vindman from the White House and the recall of diplomat Gordon Sondland from his position as U.S. ambassador to the European Union, both seen as acts of retribution. By whom? It doesn't say. The Republican-controlled Senate acquitted Trump of impeachment charges. While Trump suggested the Army might investigate Vindman, Army Secretary Ryan McCarthy later said he would not face a probe or disciplinary action. Vindman has been expected to spend the coming year at the Army War College in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So it looks like the Army, the Department of the Army, has already declared war against President Trump. The fact of the matter is what Vindman did was a violation of his oath of office. It was a violation of the deeply held value we have in the United States of America that the military, the United States military, is subordinate to civilians. In fact, in our Constitution, it's very clear which civilian the U.S. military is subordinate to, and that is the Commander-in-Chief, the President of the United States. So for a uniformed officer to take part in a coup d'etat and go unpunished by his branch of service, well, my friends, Donald Trump ought to be firing people left and right over in the Pentagon over this. Pure and simple. This is a question of civilian control of the United States military. Mark Esper is nothing more than Donald Trump's employee. And if Mark Esper is not going to follow orders, then Mark Esper needs to go. If the Chief of Staff of the Army is not going to follow orders, if the Secretary of the Army is not going to follow orders, they should go. The only exception to this is when those orders are unconstitutional. And plainly, in this case, doing things like suppressing riots, that is a function of the United States military. When we say against all enemies, foreign and domestic, what do you think the domestic means? Do you think the domestic means Republicans? I know that's what Chuck Schumer thinks, but that's not the case. We're talking about rebellions. We're talking about rioters, looting. That's what it's for. There's not a requirement there is a custom, but not a requirement, that the commander-in-chief of the United States needs the permission of the governor of the state in order to do this. In fact, in the past, they've dispatched the military without recourse to the governor of the state. Really, that's how the Civil War was fought, right? So, in all the nonsense and pettifogging that you see in this article here, there are a couple of interesting points regarding values. If we value the subordination of the military to civilian control, as I think we should, and as we always have, then I think you have to look at Vindman's actions in a very not favorable manner. Certainly not one that you would reward with promotion. But you also have to look at his superiors' actions in that same light. Unfortunately, because of civilian excess federal interference in promotions, we've wound up in a situation where we have a large portion of the top ranks of the military which are now consider themselves to be part of one political team, the Democrat Party in the United States. Indeed, some of them have made comments to the effect that in order to preserve their post-military career as lobbyists or as defense contractors, they feel it important to maintain those ties, those political ties, and not rub against that grain. So we got a problem because the values of a military subordinate to civilian control, whatever party that civilian control represents, is not compatible with the notion of the military as the armed wing of a particular party. I'll give you one more anecdote to kind of drive this point home. When Bill Clinton was inaugurated, there was a flyover, as there often is. Jet aircraft flying over at usually time to coincide with the final bars of the national anthem. At the time, one of Clinton's staffers reacted negatively to the sight of those jets flying over and was told by another, "That's okay, there are jets now." Think about the import of that. Think about what that means. There is another clip you can find with the Obamas watching an honor guard march by. And Michelle Obama says to Barack Obama, "All this for a damned flag." You can find it. You can Google it online. You'll find it. What happens when the military views itself as being the property of one political party? I would suggest nothing good, but I suspect that that is the path we are on if we are not already there. So we will see as things develop how these values play out. As always, I favor the traditional American value that the military works for the civilian government, that the civilian leader of the military, the President of the United States, has wide latitude in dealing with appointments and promotions of the military, particularly at the highest ranks. I do not advise that the president reach down too deeply into those ranks. Generally speaking, customarily you stop with general officer in order to provide political litmus tests as a basis for promotion. That's not how the military works. It's supposed to be based on fitness and leadership, not on do you believe the right things. But of course, there is plenty of political precedent historical precedent for the top military men to be closely aligned with their commander-in-chief. And that's where we'll leave it today. Have a great day.